With his binoculars trained on the tiny deserted island known as Butt, an Australian ship captain spotted smoke billowing from the forest trees in 1966 as he sailed past a small boat alongside the island. How smoke could emanate from an isolated island baffled him. A figure materialized from the woods as he peered through the binoculars, clearly engaged in deep thought. The individual in question appeared to be a tribal member, sported long hair, and was garbed in nothing but shorts. As soon as the strange man saw the boat, he began yelling and screaming, and then he threw himself into the water and started swimming towards it. The captain felt his fear rising, so he reached for the gun he had brought on board and readied himself to confront the stranger. It became clear upon arrival at the boat that the individual in question was, in fact, a teenage boy. "I am Stephen, and there are 5 other boys on the island with me," the young man explained. "After 15 months of being here, we still don't know what to do." The bizarre survival tale of 6 boys who wanted to get out of school but wound up lost and stuck on an island is told in today's video. How on earth did this occur, and how did they manage to stay alive for so long in this deserted area? In today's story, we will discover that. A teenage boy was actually identified by the captain. "I am Stephen, and there are 5 other boys on the island with me," the young man explained. "After 15 months of being here, we still don't know what to do." The remarkable survival story of 6 boys who, in an attempt to evade school, became lost and stranded on a desolate island is told in today's video. How on earth did this occur, and how did they manage to stay alive for so long in this deserted area? This is the lesson for the day. The Kingdom of Tonga is the setting for our narrative, which starts in 1965. Located in the Pacific Ocean, this nation is actually a string of smaller islands. Our story's protagonists are 6 boys from an eastern Australian region who attended a Catholic school. The students didn't merely attend classes here, they also resided on campus. At the school, they had all their nectar and sleep. There were a lot of stifling regulations and restrictions on student freedom at this school. The students could only leave the classroom once every 7 days, while the teachers supervised. Monks and nuns were the obvious instructors here, and they were quite hard on the pupils. On occasion, they would resort to harsh punishments in the event that they disobeyed or did something wrong. The 6 protagonists in our story, who were all around 14 years old when it took place, felt trapped. Sitting together, they would fantasize about a world where they could be free to do as they pleased and have endless fun. Sione, the eldest of the group, once asked his companions, "Why don't we escape?" over lunch. Somebody questioned, "Escape where?" He then said, "How about we go to Fiji?" Even though it was quite a ways away, the neighboring island of Fiji was bigger and more developed than Tonga, although they were both located in the same area of the Pacific Ocean. As the lads started to plot their epic voyage, they realized that a boat would be an absolute necessity. However, as they were all without a boat, they made the decision to take an elderly, grumpy fisherman's boat. He was an easy target because of their history of animosity. They could steal his boat without feeling bad about it, so that they could get away from the island before anyone found out they escaped. The kids decided to start their journey at night. They waited until school had been out for about an hour, made sure that most people were asleep, and then crept out of their rooms, climbing over the school wall to escape. After that, they made their way to the shore where they spotted the old man's boat, the one they despised. They lowered the sail and hauled all of their possessions onto the boat. With them, they had packed all the necessities, food, fruit, and a portable gas stove to prepare the fish they caught from the ocean. However, not a single one of them remembered to pack a map or compass. There wasn't even a single soul who considered bringing the most basic navigational aid, a map, because the distance between Tonga and Fiji is over 750 kilometers. Whatever the case may be, young children who had never been on a ship would still have a very hard time navigating such a voyage without some kind of navigational aid. Half of them had lost their minds. After about 2 hours on the road, that's when it ends. They seized the vessel, set sail, and raised the anchor. All the essentials were in their bag, including food, fruits, and a portable gas stove for preparing the fish they caught from the sea. However, not a single one of them remembered to pack a map or compass. They failed to remember to bring the most basic navigational aid due to the over 750 kilometers distance between Tonga and Fiji Island. For little ones who had never been on the ocean before, even with a compass and map, a voyage like this would have been extremely difficult. Half of them had lost their minds. After traveling for approximately 2 hours, they had already reached far from the coast they were now, and dawn was on the horizon. Since they hadn't slept and weren't accustomed to staying up late due to school rules, the 6 boys started to feel exhausted. Staying up at this hour was something they had never done before. They all eventually fell asleep as they began to nod off one by one. The wind was playing with the open sail, sending it flailing in all directions, and no one was still awake. Thunder was the only thing that roused the lads from the slumber. Out of nowhere, a raging storm woke them up in the middle of the ocean, filling them with fear. They attempted to raise the sail immediately because in a storm the wind would whip them around if it was down. However, the fabric began to rip just as they were about to hoist the sail. The storm ripped it away, adding to the poor condition of an old sail. Throughout the storm, the boys gripped the boat tightly with both hands and feet, attempting not to lose their balance and fall off. At long last the tempest passed and the skies cleared up. Now the group was in a very precarious position. They had no idea where they were heading and were unable to steer the boat in any way due to the lack of sail. For 8 days they were in this condition, tossed about by the waves of the ocean. Because the wind will be more playful with them if the sail is down during a storm, they attempted to raise it. The fruits they had run out while they were only attempting to provide for themselves. They were unsuccessful in their fishing endeavors, which they had anticipated would be simple. They attempted to catch rainwater in the coconuts they had, as even their water supply began to run out. To collect rainwater, they would split the coconut in half and use the 2 pieces as cups. Because running out of water would mean defeat, they even devised a drinking schedule in which each person would consume the fewest drops feasible. They continued to fight for 8 days until, on the 9th day, they finally saw an island in the distance. They had not seen land since leaving their island until they came across it. They continued to use their hands and anything else they could find to direct the boat towards the island, as they obviously lacked a sail. Thankfully, the waves were on their side. At long last, they approached the island during the twilight. Here they came to a halt and swam to shore, leaving the boat to float aimlessly in the ocean because they couldn't find a means to haul it in. the anchor having snapped while they were away. As the lads swam toward the island, the boat went down with them. Due to their extreme fatigue, they dove headfirst into the beach upon arrival and did not get out of bed until the sun came up the next day. This is the beginning of their far longer than planned survival quest on this island. A round of applause follows. For more than a century, the 6 kids thought they had found an abandoned island when they arrived at Atoll Island. There may have been hundreds of indigenous people living there before those 100 years. However, all of a sudden, slave dealers came charging in, abducted everyone, and sold them into slavery. There was not a single one remaining, regardless of age or gender. They abducted every single person living on the island. Everyone has left the island since then. The 6 kids set off in search of breakfast as soon as they opened their eyes. Furthermore, the woods were not suitable for crafting spears. They used spears made of sharpened wooden sticks and stones to spear fish. They had to consume the fish uncooked as they lacked fire. Despite their success in locating food, they continued to suffer from dehydration due to their inability to get potable water. They proceeded to pluck seagulls from their nests, consume their blood, and consume their eggs. Whatever it was, they thought it was the greatest meal on earth. The kids set out to explore the island and climb its heights after they had recovered a little of energy. Things and gadgets that may be beneficial were discovered in one place. 100 years ago, before the slave traffickers abducted them, this territory belonged to the island's native people. Those indigenous people who called the island home a century ago were enslaved. Here the kids discovered hens, clay pots, and stone tools. They were pleasantly surprised to see so many items. It was a magnificent abundance. They continued attempting to light a fire after that. Several days and several efforts later, they finally succeeded. They created a plan they dubbed the Fire Maintenance Schedule, since fire was important to them. During their shifts, they would alternate between tending to the fire and adding wood. They would form a circle around the fire at night and sing and hold hands. Join hands in a circle and sing along to the music. They had learned these songs in their religious education classes. Their sense of the school's value had grown, thanks be to God. One doesn't realize how fortunate they are until they're no longer blessed. Seriously, I have no doubt that they longed to return to the school from which they had fled on every single day they spent on that island. But the lads weren't short of ingenuity. They made do with what they had. They worked methodically and tirelessly, even constructing a little cottage out of palm fronds, and they even started a banana and bean plantation. They went above and above by constructing a gym complete with weights, a bench, and other necessities. Using just coconut shells and wooden boards, one of them even constructed a rudimentary guitar. Obviously, there were times when things were less than ideal. Tensions and disputes emerged between them as a result of their shared identity as adolescent guys. The system was so well organized that even in the event of a battle, the participants would each retreat to opposite sides of the island. It was a challenging scenario from a psychological standpoint. They began to despair that they would ever see their family again with each passing day on the island. In spite of this, they built a badminton court, a sport akin to tennis, near a weight room and a seat for their own use. Using just coconut shells and wooden boards, one of them even constructed a rudimentary guitar. Obviously, there were times when things were less than ideal. Problems and confrontations were inevitable given that the lads were teenagers. Even this, however, was premeditated. In the event of a quarrel between any two of them, the norm was that they would separate to opposite sides of the island and avoid touching. It was a challenging scenario from a psychological standpoint. The more time they spent apart on the island, the less optimistic they were about ever seeing their families again. Yet in spite of it all, they attempted to construct a raft out of forest trees in the last-ditch effort to save what little chance they had for making it across the water. The raft, however, was not strong enough to resist and promptly went down. They risked being swallowed by the water if they attempted to sail on it, so maybe it was for the best that it went down. They stayed there on the island and divided up the work. Someone kept the fire going, someone looked after the animals, someone cared to the farm, and someone monitored the sea. After 15 months on the island, they may have been able to stave off sadness by keeping themselves occupied with all these activities. Stephen was tasked with keeping an eye on things that day. Looking out to sea, he ascended a high hill in the hopes of seeing a rescue ship. Actually, it was on that same day that he first saw a little boat or ship going past the island. Rushing down from the hill, he made it to the beach and began yelling and waving at the individual on the other side of the Pacific. His next move was to leap into the ocean and swim towards land. Upon boarding the vessel, he saw the skipper pointed his gun at him. "Hello, I'm Stephen. I'm here on the island with 5 other boys," Stephen said in English as he lifted his hands to his chest. "After 15 months of being here, we still don't know what to do." As he lowered his firearm, the captain formally introduced himself. A fisherman from Australia. His name was Peter Warner. He said that, using his binoculars, he had seen smoke emanating from the island. Mounted on a hill, they surveyed the coastline in search of a rescue ship. On that same day, he saw a tiny boat or ship crossing the island for the very first time. Rushing down from the hill, he made it to the beach and began yelling and waving at the individual on the other side of the Pacific. His next move was to leap into the ocean and swim towards land. Upon boarding the vessel, he saw the skipper pointed his gun at him. "Hello, I'm Stephen. I'm here on the island with 5 other boys," Stephen said in English as he lifted his hands to his chest. "After 15 months of being here, we still don't know what to do." As he lowered his firearm, the captain formally introduced himself. Peter Warner, an Australian fisherman, was the skipper. According to him, he was intrigued by the sight of smoke emerging from the woods via his binoculars and decided to visit the island to investigate more. As far as he knew, the island was abandoned. The forest's trees caught him off guard, so he went over to the island to find out what was going on. He thought the island was uninhabited. When he saw Stephen, the narrative became clear to him. 5 more kids climbed down and got in the boat after that. The Coast Guard verified that the children had been missing for almost a year and were believed to be dead. Captain Peter obtained their identities and contacted them. Even funerals were conducted for them by their own family. Peter was taken aback and emotionally by this encounter. The children's excitement upon returning to their family and homes was, of course, beyond words. The youngsters finally made it to the closest port, but paradise was a little delayed. The elderly fisherman from whom they had taken the vessel had denounced them, leading to their swift arrest. Just think about it. These were little kids who had endured pain and seclusion for at least 15 months before they arrived. Permit them to take a deep breath and see their loved ones. Adamant, nonetheless, was the elderly guy. The same Captain Peter, who had saved them, now wanted to provide a hand once again. Though he was not filthy rich, Peter had deep ties to some Australian media sources and was the son of a rich man. He got in touch with Broadcaster 7, an Australian broadcaster, and proposed. As soon as they arrived at the closest port, they were taken into custody. Why? Because the elderly fisherman whose boat they had pilfered had already denounced them, so the moment they got back on land, the cops were sent to take them into custody. Picture this. Despite everything, they were just little children who had just emerged from 15 months of captivity and anguish. Permit them to take a deep breath and see their loved ones. Still, the elderly guy refused to budge. The same Captain Peter who had saved them now wanted to provide a hand once again. Though he was not filthy rich, Peter had deep ties to some Australian media sources and was the son of a rich man. He reached out to Station 7, an Australian news station, and provided them the story. The tale and inquired as to why it hadn't been turned into a documentary, a narrative that was both novel and riveting. Peter was given a tiny sum as an advance by the channel, which dispatched a team of photographers and showed interest in the subject. After deducting the boat's worth from this sum, Peter gave the elderly man the money. The cops let the youngsters go when the elderly guy gave his approval. As soon as the lads were let out of jail, the team from the channel began recording everything that happened. Peter later took the lads out on the water to the island where they were born and raised. Their island of residence was distinct from the one occupied by the photographers. They started filming the lads as soon as they reached their relatives. There were many feelings, even sobbing, after all this time and after thinking they were gone forever. If you have never had these emotions, it is difficult to put yourself in their shoes. Imagine for a second that someone you care about vanishes without a trace, and you fear for their life, only to be resurrected 15 months later. Describe your emotions. Unless you've been there, I don't believe you can really grasp what it's like. How the parents felt seeing their children again is something only God knows. It being a major occasion, the group naturally celebrated with feasts and other festivities. They went back to the island with the TV team a few days later when the kids had gotten some rest and enjoyed being with their relatives. The video and the visuals we witnessed were recorded there to capture the incidents involving the youngsters. In order to record what transpired with the lads, they videotaped it. Obviously, they weren't interested in returning to school, so they spent some time fishing with Peter. After that, they all went their own ways and became successful in various fields. Still, Manu is still Peter's co-worker, and the two of them still think of themselves as best friends. The narrative has come to a close. If you like this video, please consider subscribing and giving us a bell. Here we have reached the end of our story. Don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the notification bell. Thank you for watching, see you in the next video, and goodbye.